Hello and welcome to Unacademy, one-stop destination for English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to another episode of the Geographer, where we bring to you important news headlines and articles relevant for your examination which have been in discussion from the areas of geography and environment and ecology. Today, we bring forward the discussion regarding another important news headlines which has been grabbing all the eyeballs across the world for the past couple of days. And that is the huge and the humongous flooding which has happened in the region of UAE. And the loss of lives which have been accompanied in the region at an unprecedented scale. Now, while the initial media reports talked about the impact of cloud seeding, that cloud seeding would have caused this issue. But later on, we know better about it, and in this video, we shall be discussing why is it exactly that the region has experienced such a high amount of rainfall, but simultaneously we'll take this opportunity to discuss briefly about the concept of artificial rain and cloud seeding, why that is done, and what is the larger purpose behind it. Now, before we initiate the discussion, a couple of important announcements for you. Now, first of all, we are very elated to announce that a significant amount of students have actually achieved success who have had an opportunity to gain some amount of information and have been involved with us. So that is a significantly good news. And simultaneously, we have announced some of the biggest price drop that you will ever see, where the prices of the products have been slashed down almost by more than 50%. And the products now are very, very cheap if you compare it as compared to anywhere else in the market. The quality that you get here as compared to anywhere else and at the prices that you get, that is an opportunity that you simply cannot miss. So do avail this opportunity, do utilize this opportunity and join us so that together we can achieve success in this examination. Now, after this, another minor announcement regarding the launch of the Conquer Prelims and the crash course for aiming and basically shapelining and streamlining your preparation for the prelims examination. So we are launching the static crash course on the app and the current affairs crash course that shall be launched from 1st of May. That is being launched on YouTube. So here the starting date of 19th April is where you will observe this static discussion related to prelims being conducted on the app on the daily basis. Every day from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. join us live on the app and get an idea about what is relevant for the examination. Overall, we'll have 50 live classes which we have scheduled, and here from 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. in total 31 live classes. With the help of the MCQs, we shall be covering as much portion as is required for your examination. Now, having said that, let us talk about the news which has been in discussion. Floods in UAE. Now, immediately, all the major media outlets, if you would have read the newspaper articles, all of them talked about that there has been the cloud seeding and artificial rain which is behind the incessant flooding which has been observed in the Emirates. But slowly and steadily, picture started becoming much more clearer. And now we know for good that cloud seeding in itself was not responsible. Something else has caused this huge amount of rainfall. But regardless of whatever might have been the reason, the flood and the deluge which has been created has been quite significant. Large areas have been inundated and significant amount of casualties have been reported in the region of the Emirates, Oman, and so on. So here, what has actually happened? So in the duration of 24 hours, the region or UAE, if you consider only UAE, that has received close to around 15.2 centimeter of rainfall. Now, in case you are unable to fathom how much 15.2 centimeter of rainfall will be, just to give you an idea, this is the average amount of rainfall that the region of UAE would receive ideally in a couple of years. So almost that much amount of rainfall has occurred only within one day. So that has led to inundation in the streets and deluge at an unprecedented proportion. But then, immediately, the blame was put on artificial rain. That UAE has been carrying out this ambitious program since the 90s in order to carry out cloud seeding to cause that artificial rain, and it must have been one of those programs of UAE which has created that unsustainably large cloud, and that has brought this much amount of rainfall. So before we analyze that why artificial rain is not the reason behind it, let us understand the basic concept involved in artificial rain. So whenever any particular organization or any particular country tries its hand at inducing an artificial rain, they carry it out by the process what is referred to as cloud seeding. Now, what is the principle involved in that? The principle involved is the basics of cloud formation. Now, how is it that the cloud formation takes place? Anywhere. What is the principle of cloud formation? Why clouds get created in the first place? So, when you have water vapor up into the atmosphere, due to lower temperature, the water vapor undergoes condensation, right? So, vapor in the atmosphere, that undergoes condensation. Now, as the vapor condenses, it gets converted into liquid water droplets sometimes, and sometimes into ice particles as well, what we refer to as solidification of the vapor as well, right? So it gets converted into liquid droplets and ice particles. It is this liquid droplets and ice particles which are held in the cloud. That is the basic principle for a natural cloud formation. But in certain areas, we observe that even if there is some amount of vapor in the atmosphere, there is still not a substantial cloud formation, or even if the clouds are there, it doesn't bring rains. Many of the days you would also have encountered this condition. When you would have looked up into the sky, there would be some scattered amount of clouds, but it wouldn't have caused any amount of rainfall. It would have been very dry. So the regions such as UAE and the Arabian Peninsula in general, many parts of India as well, we suffer from this particular issue of lack of rain. So in order to carry out that rainfall, in order to expedite the occurrence of rainfall, cloud seeding is done. So what is done in the process? In that particular process, the principle involved is that in the atmosphere, higher reaches of troposphere where you actually have the cloud formation which can lead to rainfall, you spray some particles, very cold particles. Particles such as silver iodide, or sometimes even dry ice. Now this is at low temperature, very low temperature, it is very cold. So when you spray it in the air at a higher elevation, what happens? The air temperature in the surrounding will also cool down quite significantly, isn't it? So this will cool down the air substantially, and when the air gets cooled down, then after that, generally when we talk about the vapor carrying capacity of air, it is dependent on temperature. A warmer air parcel can always carry more amount of moisture as compared to a cold air parcel, right? The carrying capacity of a warmer air parcel is much more. Okay, so generally when you consider a warm air, it can accommodate high amount of vapor, right? So it can accommodate that within the air parcel. Now, if you have very high amount of vapor in the air and the air is also happily able to accommodate it, condensation will not happen because it is a stable condition. But somehow if you suddenly lower the air temperature, then what happens? The carrying capacity of the air will reduce quite substantially. quite significantly so. So here, the cooling of air reduces the carrying capacity. Carrying capacity basically refers to the amount of vapor that the air parcel can hold in ideal conditions, right? So it will reduce the carrying capacity. Now, once the carrying capacity in itself is reduced, then the additional vapor which was present, what will happen to it? It will be forced to condense. So that will lead to condensation. Okay. Condensation of surplus particles or surplus vapor. Now, when the surplus vapor gets condensed, and it is a very low temperature, so they will condense into generally the ice particles. So suddenly, in a region where you had very little amount of cloud formation, for example, suddenly you will observe a lot of ice particles getting accumulated there. As a result, what happens? Slowly and steadily, these ice particles will provide a very cold surface. So the air in contact with those ice particles, they will also cool down. There also the carrying capacity will reduce. There will be further more condensation. So it kicks in a kind of a chain reaction of very low temperature and carrying out condensation. So whatever vapor is present in that area, by spraying these particles, you tend to accelerate the condensation of all the vapor particles which are present there. And eventually the cloud becomes heavy enough and that induces rainfall. So that is the basic principle involved behind cloud seeding. So how is it done? It is basically carried out by certain measures, such as you also have some of the sounding rockets which are launched, and those rockets detonate at a height of 3 to 4 to 5 kilometers, and they spread and spray the dry ice, or in certain cases silver iodide. Sometimes what happens, and in most of the cases what is followed is that you have specifically modified airplanes. These specifically modified airplanes, they carry out the silver iodide particles and they spray the silver iodide particles, right? So this silver iodide particles, they are sprayed in the air, okay? They are sprayed in the air, and these particles basically, remember, it can be silver iodide or dry ice. So that will accelerate the cloud formation from where? From where will the vapor come? From the surrounding. It is not as if this dry ice can generate its own water vapor. No. Whatever vapor is there in the surrounding, only that will be taken. And then it causes rainfall. So that is the principle which is involved, and that is the concept of artificial rain and cloud seeding. On a large scale, this was experimented globally for a global prestigious event for the first time before 2008 Beijing Olympics, when it was the time for China to showcase its prowess, that it has indeed come a long way from the benchmark of a developing country. So it had hosted the Olympics at a very grandiose level. But then the air quality in Beijing was much, much worse as compared to what you see today. It was at the levels of what you see in the polluted days in New Delhi, for example. So that was a prestige issue for China. So that is where China started carrying out these artificial rains, and it helped in abating the pollution level. UAE, for that matter, and the countries in the Arabian Peninsula, they have been suffering from water scarcity for a very long time. So since 1990s, they have initiated this program of carrying out the artificial rain, where they launch the aircrafts, and in 50 to 100 sorties, they will disperse enough amount of silver iodide to cause some amount of rainfall in certain areas. So much so that even this year, when New Delhi was experiencing very high levels of air pollution, you basically had one of the plans which was mooted to the government that let's cause or create artificial rains. So artificial rains as an idea is fast catching up, and that too in the era of climate change, where the rainfall distribution is already becoming much more haphazard and sporadic. Now, after this deluge has occurred in Dubai and in UAE and in the surrounding areas, immediately the finger was laid to the fact that, look, UAE has been carrying this program. This year also UAE has publicly announced that it is carrying out this program. So that might be responsible for this unnecessary and also rather not unnecessary but unexpected amount of rainfall which has occurred in that area. Now, the reason turns out to be something different. So, as a student of geography, it is prerogative of you to understand why that rainfall has occurred at such a large level, why so much amount of rainfall has occurred in a concentrated area. So it is a combination of various factors. One of the factors is the influence of temperature. Another is pressure. Another is the climate change. And also another factor which has exaggerated the amount of damage caused is basically poor drainage. Something that almost all the urban areas across the world, they suffer from it. That poor drainage systems, that water is not being evacuated at the same quick pace. So let us understand this, why this has happened. So basically, in these months of April, UAE in general experiences thunderstorms. But why at this particular level? So let us understand. Now, to begin with, if you consider this to be the ground surface, at the ground surface, the temperature has been quite low, or rather the temperature has been quite very high. Now, due to heating and climate change has further exaggerated it. Now, that very high temperature has created a very substantial low pressure. Other than that, in the upper atmosphere as well, in the upper reaches of troposphere as well, there has been a simultaneous creation of a low pressure. So what this has done, it has created like a vacuum pump, a squeeze as it is being referred to, a squeeze was created. So due to that squeeze, all the air in this region rapidly, almost violently, was pulled up. Now ideally, this in itself can cause significant amount of thunderstorms. To exaggerate and add on to this abnormality was the fact that around this region you have the presence of water body. Right, the Persian Gulf is present there. So you have the sea. So here, even this air was attracted and was pulled up. Now, this was not a normal pulling up action. Understand, the air normally over the region of UAE would be very dry, desertified area. Now, in dry air, we experience the fact that as you move higher in terms of altitude, the temperature starts dropping almost exponentially. The dry lapse rate comes into the picture, where the temperature can reduce by almost 10 degrees Celsius with every increase in height. Every kilometer of increase in height, the temperature can drop by around 10 degrees Celsius. So at higher elevation, you had very low temperature. So, not only was there a pressure difference created horizontally, there was a pressure difference created vertically as well. And because of that, that suction, that squeeze acted. And the presence of water body nearby added the moisture to the rising air. And because you had very low temperature higher up, why did you have very low temperature higher up? Because of the conditions of dry lapse rate. In desert areas, when the air is dry, the temperature falls very, very quickly, almost at a rate of close to around 10 degrees Celsius per kilometer. So you can think about it that if at the ground the temperature is around 35 degrees Celsius, at an elevation of around 4 kilometers, the temperature would be -5 degrees Celsius. So very low temperature. Due to that, violent and vicious thunderstorms, clouds were created. And that has added to the rainfall. Now, during these months, basically, UAE, as I told you, and the region of the Arabian Peninsula, they experience these unseasonal thunderstorms and rains. And that is because in this entire area, during this time, you have the low pressure systems on the ground which exists. These low pressure systems eventually come over to the Indian subcontinent as well. And that is why we have monsoonal rainfalls created during the month of June, July, etc. But then these low pressure systems, when they are there is also a thermal difference in terms of how much heat is received in the water body and the nearby land areas. Land areas tend to get much more hotter. But then there is an instability which is happening over the water bodies as well. Climate change has created a situation where even the Arabian Sea is experiencing very high conditions of temperature. That is why you will find increased occurrence of tropical cyclones in the Arabian Sea for the past few years, and the recurving of the tropical cyclones hitting the region of Oman, UAE, and so on. So the water is also getting hotter. So all these issues, they get exaggerated, added onto it, and poor urban planning in terms of the drainage systems, which is prevalent in all the cities of the world, they simply could not evacuate that excess rainfall, and hence you had this deluge. Okay? So that is basically the entire reasoning behind it. Now, a quick compilation of everything that we have discussed in the video. First of all, we have discussed what is cloud seeding. What is cloud seeding? Right? The principle involved. So this talks about reducing the carrying capacity of air. Reducing the carrying capacity. Now, how do you reduce the carrying capacity of the air? By spraying cold particles, or by spraying dry ice and silver iodide. Right? As a result of that, when you reduce the carrying capacity by spraying this, increases the condensation. Condensation from where? Will it start picking up moisture from the ground now? No. Of the vapor which is present in the surrounding. That's it. And then eventually increases the size of condensates, which becomes heavier, and that brings rain. Right? But this is not responsible for what has happened in Dubai and in UAE. If only cloud seeding would have been responsible, then Oman would not have experienced so much amount of casualties. Only Dubai would have, or UAE would have experienced this. But the entire region has been disturbed. So what are the reasons? So when you talk about the reasons, there has been a squeeze. Why? Due to low pressure on ground and upper atmosphere. Okay? That is why. And eventually that squeeze has basically formed large clouds. It was exaggerated by the differential and the presence of water body. Presence of water body. Because the water body indicates a kind of a thermal difference. Difference in terms of heating. And then it was further accelerated by the conditions of poor drainage. Okay, water body differential heating. That added to the pressure difference. Okay, so this is what we have discussed. So now we know why Dubai or UAE and Oman have experienced the conditions. What is the actual reason? What is the concept behind cloud seeding? This much information is more than sufficient for you to be able to understand why this has happened and also to be able to tackle any questions associated with that. So that will end the episode and the information regarding the floods in the region of UAE and the overall area of Arabian Peninsula. If you have liked the video, please don't forget to click on the like, share and the subscribe button, and do join us on the series of the Geographer to keep yourself updated with these particular news stories. Join us for the Conquer Prelims as well and sharpen your preparation for the prelims examination. That will be all from my side. Thank you. Take care of yourself. Goodbye.